Hey there, welcome to Echo Conversations. I have with me today Rob Bettis, who we talked about this. You are a independent digital marketer?
That sounds good.
Is that good?
We'll go with that.
I've heard you called a free agent, marketer, solopreneur, but you've landed now on independent?
Sure. Well, yeah.
Awesome.
An indie marketing consultant. We'll go with that.
Okay, good. And you've worked with everybody from businesses to nonprofits. Like we said, you're now on your own.
Correct.
So you've kind of dabbled in every field or every genre of business and marketing.
That's right. Yeah. I spent 10 years in an agency setting, so worked with a wide variety of companies during that time, and also had the pleasure of co-founding 2 different nonprofits here locally. So I've done a little bit of a lot of things.
Been around the block.
Yeah.
So at robbettis.com, that's where we can find you.
Correct.
And that's where what we're going to talk about today, the Rob Bettis' 6 Ps.
Oh, goodness. Yeah.
Is that the official name? Or
Sure.
did you have like the 6 Ps to success and prosperity?
Yeah, that sounds even better.
It's another P, prosperity. But when I was, I knew I wanted to have you on. And so I was like, what are we going to talk about? There's a myriad of things to talk about with Rob.
Sure.
But these 6 things stood out. And I was like, how cool that, we already are talking to ministries and nonprofits about a lot of these things. But you had them so succinct. I mean, who doesn't love good alliteration?
That's right.
Our ministry partners, our preachers and ministers, they love alliteration. A good sermon has at least 3 points. They're all... anyway, I'm kidding. But it works out really well. So I wanted to go through those with you. So because these are yours, I'll let you kind of guide us through those. But let's just jump in.
Yeah. And I'll give a little bit of context.
Yeah.
If you've taken a marketing strategy course, if you've read a book, you've probably heard of the 4 Ps.
Okay.
Those are kind of foundational in marketing strategy. And what I've done with my 6 Ps is kind of take that and iterate on them a little bit. I think there's some marketing trends that are happening in the world today that are causing the need to view those 4 Ps just a little bit differently. And that's what I've tried to come up with in my 6
Nice.
Ps. So, yeah.
Took the 4 and we're like, that's not good enough.
Just expanded just
I got
a little.
2 more.
That's right.
Okay, well,
That's
cool.
right. So we can dive in. The first one's people,
Okay.
and that's and I should say these are somewhat foundational, right? We start at the bottom and build up. So when we talk about this in a bigger context, if you're off on the first one, it's going to continue to skew as you work your way through the other piece. So when we start with people, we start kind of really diving into who your audience is, who it is you're trying to serve. It's probably the most succinct way I can say that.
Yeah, and so like when we've talked to ministries, we use the word persona, which totally fits. It's a sub
could be a
P.
P. That's right. One
but
day.
Persona, and not just target audience, but which is kind of, I think traditionally people have talked about what's your target audience, but we want to dial down even deeper into this idea of persona. So we like to we coach people to get to know their persona so well that they know their name. They know what kind of devices they interact with, where they get their information, what social media platforms they're using.
Right.
We've even seen, we know one nonprofit, a large successful nonprofit that actually went and made cardboard cutouts. They got like a stock image of like, so if one of their personas is this African pastor, like they found a life-size 6-foot-tall cardboard, and when they want to talk about him, when they have a ministry or a meeting around that guy, they bring him into the office, and like, I mean,
That's wild.
Yeah, it's wild, but like they know this guy. So anyway, it's fascinating, and I love sharing that because it's like that is taking this to an extreme that they don't just know their people, they know their person.
Yeah.
So
I love that.
Anyway, really cool example for that group.
Yeah.
What's next?
Well, I will add with people,
Yeah.
One thing that I see a lot of my clients run into, I'm sure you guys have run into it too, is for a lot of nonprofits specifically, you talk about your people in much broader terms. You can think of it as like anyone would be willing to participate in the service that we provide. And often we start using terms like anyone and everyone, we've not done our due diligence. I think figuring out who your people are requires a tremendous amount of empathy, as you kind of alluded to earlier. And the more empathy, the more dialed in you have, the better the rest of this is going to work out for you. So I think when we start assuming things and we forget to use that level of empathy that's needed, things can sometimes go sideways a little bit.
Totally.
Yeah.
I think that's what we're seeing with all the polarization of social media. It's that it robs us of empathy for our people. Like you and I, there's a lot going on other than just exchanging words, but we're reading each other, right? There's a lot of information passing unspoken between us.
Sure.
And you lose that with social media, which it causes all this, like I can say some really hurtful, cutting things to you, typing it out, and I don't feel it. So getting to know your people so much that you even can you can feel it. You can feel them. It's a weird way to say it, but
knowing who they are, knowing what they value, knowing what they think is important, those sorts of things start to make a really big difference when you're learning how to speak to them in a way that you'll be heard.
And you said something off camera earlier. I'm glad that you slowed me down. Are we trying to reach everybody, every single person? Is every business or ministry in this case trying to reach every single person?
I think one trend that we're seeing in the for-profit space that I think has led me to kind of revise these P's is a hyper-segmentation in the marketplace. It used to be when our parents were kids, there were maybe 2 or 3 brands of each product that you might want to buy. We have dozens and dozens, and each one fills a very specific niche. And so we have exponentially more options when we look at service providers or product providers now. And I don't think the nonprofit space is necessarily that different from that trend. Might be lagging behind a little bit, but I think it's coming. That I think people are looking for a unique solution to a problem. And so when we start thinking about, are we working with everyone? I think we have to ask ourselves the question, are we something to everybody or are we everything to someone? And when we start thinking those latter terms, I think we position ourselves in a way that we're irreplaceable for a certain group of people. And I think that's a really good spot to be in.
It's really good, man. And I'm pretty sure I just heard you drop your next P.
Yes, I did, inadvertently. And that P is position.
Okay.
So when we understand who it is that we're looking to serve, we also have to kind of assess where we fit in the marketplace, what other people are out there trying to serve that need, how we relate to them. Again, this P requires a tremendous amount of empathy too. I think a lack of empathy on these two P's is probably the biggest tripping point for a lot of organizations. So, where do you fit in the marketplace? How are you perceived, and how should you be perceived? Those are often two different things for a lot of companies. And again, if there are dozens of other organizations servicing the same need the same way, then positioning is going to be really challenging. Trying to position yourself as being unique or special in the marketplace, worthy of attention, becomes a much greater challenge.
Yeah. So because I've seen the cheat sheet of your P's, I don't want to go too fast. So slow me down if I start to get into the future P's.
Okay.
But we've talked about in another Echo conversation and when we consult with ministries about the book, The Human Brand. Would you say that some of the brand voice stuff starts to come out? And I think it may overlap with another P, but do you see that being kind of like the idea of warmth and competence? I think this is kind of where maybe that starts to, as far as how people think about your brand. Yeah,
I think it certainly comes into play. And we start to talk about, and this we'll talk about this next, but how you deliver a message that's perceived correctly. And a lot of that's going to be guided with how you are positioned currently and how you want to be positioned, I think. We run into a situation, I saw a study the other day where 2/3 of marketing messages for most organizations are no longer coming from the organization itself. They're coming from third parties, social media, online reviews, those sorts of things. So there's a source of information about your organization that carries a very powerful voice that you have less control over than a lot of the marketing messages that you're sending out intentionally. And so there's this level of accountability that's happening in the space that's unlike anything we've seen before. So that's where that empathy comes in as far as how you're positioned and doing the things that you need to do to make sure that you are where you think you are and you are where you should be.
It's like a self-awareness, but of a brand.
Sure. Yeah.
And are you talking about like Yelp reviews and Google reviews now have just changed the game, especially for retailers? Now that's maybe a little different than most people watching this video, but
Sure.
a bad Yelp review, that's like a scar you can't
Yeah.
you can't recover from sometimes. Does that play in here as well? Like I think a lot of elements play into this, but
yeah, I think even for nonprofit organizations,
social proof.
Yeah, you have a bad experience with some customers or some donors or some folks that are serving in your organization, and it starts to carry weight. People are usually not as bold as to talk really bad about charities on social media unless they have a really bad experience. But the weight of what people are saying, about you, maybe not to your face, is going to dramatically impact where you're positioned in the marketplace for people that may not even have a firsthand experience with your organization yet.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that optimism. You have to remember, media ministries have YouTube comments.
Yeah.
And that is where
that's
the lowest of humanity occurs. So we're talking, I totally get it. Do you want to move on to the next one?
Sure. Yeah. Well? Yeah. The next one is promise. And I think, again, another unique thing about organizations now, as I alluded to earlier, people are looking for a specific solution to a very specific problem. And so I think a lot of organizations would be well suited to define what they're promising to the people they serve. And it's probably worth taking a little bit of a step back and saying, especially for nonprofits, when we talk about the 6 Ps, nonprofits often have 2 sets of them at least. One is to the people they serve, and one is to the people who partner with them to allow that service to take place. Mm-hmm. So maybe your donor base or your network of volunteers that enable you to do what it is you do, and then another might be geared more to the people for whom you deliver value.
Yeah.
Or you're servicing, the people that benefit from your organization.
So kind of
system.
promises in probably at least 2 ways. I'm trying to think, is there like to foundations or donors, and then to the end user, like we think in technology, the end user, or at least your customer, the seeker.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think when we talk about promise, we want to clearly define what it is that we're providing to the person we're serving. And that can be in a for-profit or not-profit space. I think what's key about this, and 2 things perhaps, but the biggest one is by defining what it is you do, who it is, what your promise is to those you serve.
Sounds so easy.
It sounds easy. It's incredibly difficult, no doubt about it. But I think one of the reasons it is difficult is because in that you are also defining what you're not. And so for a lot of organizations, it's really easy to say you do something. It's almost a lot harder to let go of the things that you're saying you're not going to do. But you're not going to have that laser focus. You're not going to have that being everything to someone kind of approach until you can let go of the things that you aren't and let go of the things you don't do in order to really hone in on the thing you do and deliver on that promise.
Man. That hits home with so many conversations that we've had with ministries because their heart is so good and they want to do so much, but the reality is they're not equipped to do everything that they want to do or even that they're good at, and to find that they feel like saying no to something is saying no to people and to souls,
to an individual.
And man, it's like it breaks their heart to say that we don't do that. But man, through partnerships and stuff, like there's just then we could do a series of videos about like just that. I think that's huge.
Sure.
How would you say that people can like kind of measure if they're in there? Like, what's a good? How am I going to ask this? Like, what's a good system to put together for let's say a ministry or nonprofit to make sure they're staying within the bounds? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's hard. I think
because we all know about mission. We all hear create a mission and a vision for your organization.
Yeah.
Is that in this realm? And then how do we kind of keep in the bounds?
Yeah, I think oftentimes the mission statement and the promise are parallel. They're not necessarily the same thing because one's more focused on the organization and the other's more focused on the person you're serving. But you interact with this relationship with the folks that you're serving, and you want them to understand what they should expect from you, and then you want to deliver on that promise. And really, it's those two weights of a scale of if it's out of whack, if you're over promising and under delivering, or if you're under promising and over delivering, you're still doing yourself a disservice because you're not accurately representing what you're going to do for folks.
Yeah.
And so I think your community, the people you serve, and your organization's best suited when those two things are in balance, and that requires some feedback, right? Like that
Right.
requires putting
Right.
mechanisms in place where you're constantly getting return information from your operations and the people you're interacting with.
Yeah. Okay, so we know our people. We've talked about position. We've got our promise. We figured that out. We've done the hard work of getting our
Yep.
promise.
Yep.
So now we've got to get it out to people.
Yeah, now we got to do the promotion.
All right.
And so I think that's where most people think to start when they think about their marketing plan is promotion. And so I think those preceding exercises are key to making sure the promotion is spot on, and it's saying the right thing to the right people, and importantly for a lot of ministries with limited budgets, it's doing so in the most cost efficient way. You'd like to have as little waste as you can in your advertising budget, because that's
Slim
valuable
pickings, man.
dollars.
Yeah.
For sure. So
You talk about with minimal distortion. I know that's in your like you use that phrase, minimal distortion.
it is, yeah. And marketing classes of a degree in marketing and an MBA, we talk about a term called noise. And noise is you have a marketer who's giving a message, and then you have the people that are receiving that message. And any distortion that takes place between one and the other is what marketers call noise, or I'll call distortion. And so, for example, if you were going to put a really heavy-hearted, dramatic video and you wanted to do a Super Bowl commercial with that kind of message, would it be received well? What are the Super Bowl audience people doing? Most of them are celebrating. Most of them are looking for commercials to be entertained. Oftentimes looking for comedy.
Yeah.
And so you could spend a tremendous amount of money on a message that catches people the wrong way,
Right.
and whose mindset is not where it needs to be to fully grasp that message. And so that kind of distortion is what we talk about. And want to avoid really in our promotion. So knowing, whether it's on the donor side or the delivery side of what your ministry is doing, knowing what people want to hear and figuring out the best ways, the best channels to get that message to them is very valuable.
I love your Super Bowl analogy because, I've never actually thought about that, but you're right. Like, people talk about some of those more touching commercials, but who really wants to start getting teary-eyed with their hand in a bag of Cheetos?
Yeah, and a big
It's like
in a big room full of people.
in a room full of people
Yeah.
that are yelling and all this. Yeah, absolutely. I love that.
Yeah.
I love that picture. I was imagining the Super Bowl party we went to this year. I was like, yeah, they fell flat because
Yeah.
people made fun of them more so than really felt it, even though they. I don't know. Maybe it may have been memorable. Anyway,
Right.
I just got my brain
Yeah.
going with that.
And what's the example that people often use are kind of the commercials about animals and animal shelters and
Right.
the really sappy music and the really sad, like, oh my gosh, this is
Yeah.
terrible. And if people receiving that message are not in a frame of mind worthy of receiving a message that heavy, then it may not be received well.
Right.
Yeah.
Minimal distortion.
Minimal distortion.
Okay, so we got our message out there.
Yep.
Is this where, like in sales and sales marketing or commerce, whatever the right term is,
Sure.
You make sale
Yep.
at this point, and then I feel like this is where you really shine. You're such a process guy.
Yeah, I think traditionally in a lot of big organizations make the sale and hand it off to a completely different team with completely different values in order to deliver on the sale. It gets handed to the operations folks oftentimes in a for-profit sense. And I think that's one way that the world has changed beyond what's traditional marketing strategy. I think that when that promise is made and the customer buys in, the person being served buys into that promise, I think the organization would be well served to deliver on that promise through the whole interaction. And so I think with a lot of folks, and you've probably been in this situation, you buy something, someone comes out to your house, gives you a good sales pitch on whatever it is, and then the people that come to deliver on that promise may have completely different intentions or maybe a completely different experience. And if you didn't know better, you'd think it was two different organizations that you're working with. And I think that turns a lot of customers off, and it's a huge
bummer.
It is.
The inconsistency. You think you've got the build up, you're excited about the purchase, whatever that thing is.
Yep.
And then it's like after they've gotten your money, in some cases after you've financed, you're like, I'm in this for the long haul.
Yeah.
And then the services are maybe adequate.
Yep.
And then like you're just treated like, well, sucker, we got you. It's such a bummer.
Yeah, you place your trust in that organization in some form or fashion, and they've made a promise to you, and you trust that they're going to fulfill that promise. And to the extent that the delivery on that promise doesn't match up with what was communicated on the front end, provides for a bad experience. And I think when we start talking about the reality of 2/3 of marketing messages aren't from you, like you want to be consistent with that interaction with your audience the whole way through.
Yeah.
An example of that locally, our local power company makes a big deal about putting the booties on the shoes when they come to do work on your house. That's silly, right? But some of them might have muddy boots, but really, and it's really just it's a signal, and it's communicating to the customer that like we're trying to deliver on the promise that we've made you of being courteous and on time, and whatever things are the other things that are valuable in that particular space. But so often, if we think about and I am a process-driven person, as you alluded to earlier, and we often think with our process hat on, how can this be the most efficient and delivery mechanism? And I think when we do, we often start cutting out little ways that deliver on the promise and extend the promise through the process. And so I think for most organizations, it's really helpful to take a little bit of a step back and consider perhaps a little of the efficiency or the profit that's lost on that delivery as being an extenuation of your marketing more so than inefficient service.
Yeah, that's good. Two things. One, our audience has already heard me brag about our local power and fiber, because they do so well at every point. It's excellent. Yeah. I even recently tried to I'm looking at personal finance stuff, and I'm trying to like find all the places where I'm letting money go to waste. And I tried to leave. I tried to go find a better price, better service, and I couldn't do it because it's so good consistently. So I love that you're bragging on them as well. It's consistent, and it was about completely something else. It wasn't about the guy at my house. It was about when I call. I've called a couple times, nothing like huge outages or anything, but just a tweak, maybe reset a route or something. And it's always been such an amazing customer service experience.
That's awesome.
So
and when you talk about delivering on that promise throughout the whole process, you're no longer just competing on price, right? You're not distilled down to the lowest common denominator for your organization. It gives you a touch point that allows you to differentiate yourself in a way that even if you as a customer don't understand the technical or idiosyncrasies of a particular service, you get the booties on the shoes, right? Like you don't have to understand how the fiber works to know that they're coming out and they're doing what they can to take care of your house.
Absolutely. Now, before we move on to the last one, nonprofit, your experience with nonprofits. Put on your nonprofit hat in this realm. How do you see this? Because I guess sometimes a sale isn't as clear for some nonprofits.
Sure.
And the process of after the conversion or whatever, what can this look like? How can nonprofits really basically take this all the way for the nonprofit?
Yeah, sure. If we want to start on the donor side, the intake side of a ministry, it often includes the storytelling component or keeping the folks that are partnering with you through volunteering, through financial means, keeping them in the loop and allowing them to walk through and understand the value of their the resources they're dedicating to your ministry and what that actually is resulting in.
Yeah.
And let them kind of walk alongside you, and that is a big one. And so that sometimes would include creating opportunities for them to come and get their hands proverbially dirty.
Dirty, yeah.
Maybe literally dirty, depending on
the nonprofit the situation.
And creating those kind of moments that, maybe those aren't the most efficient installations of what your ministry is doing, but they're allowing your partners to come along with you and participate. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And it changes. It makes them, changes their mind, allows them to understand the perspective different and get deeper in relationship with you, which I think is big. On the other side, on the service side of things, I think we have access to so many channels of fulfilling our products and service needs now, right? And so much has become, and especially in recent years, driven by trust, driven by like what it is that, it's not so much that you can fulfill my promise, but it's me trusting you as someone that can fulfill my promise,
Okay,
And so I think when we are serving people, such a big component of it is what our motivation is. Like, what's our agenda, And oftentimes people have an agenda, and for a lot of ministries, it's not as much agenda driven as it is just a heart for helping people,
Right.
And so I think if we can make sure that how we're delivering on our promise continues to reinstill that our agenda really is to help those people, then it can really deepen our relationship too.
Dude, awesome.
Yep.
And I know this next one, a lot of our, especially in Echo, a lot of our admin, we know we focus a lot on the interface. We focus on making it really easy to use. Yes, I'm selling Echo right now a little bit.
Sure. Yeah.
But we know at the end of the day, there's one thing that our admins are most interested in, and that's reporting.
That's right.
And that's part of this last one.
Yep.
Yeah.
It is. It's a big part. The last one's polish.
Okay.
And that polish, you're admitting that as you get through the other 5 Ps and you get to the end, they're not perfect, right? And
which is a P.
It's also a P. We've got like 12 Ps now. I'm gonna have to go back and reassess. No, it's really just acknowledging that things can always be improved upon. And a few decades ago, the marketing industry just didn't. You didn't have the information you have now, especially if you're doing any kind of marketing digitally. You often have that reporting through tools that wasn't once available. And so polish is all about getting to the end, assessing, getting that information, that feedback loop in place, and figuring out ways that you can revise and improve.
Yeah.
And oftentimes when we get to the end and we start processing that data, we're led to a place where we perhaps understand our people a little better.
Nice.
And so now we've completed the loop, right?
Yeah, nice.
We're started back over.
I see what you did there.
And with our deeper understanding of people, we can go back through the Ps. And so that constant iteration, A/B testing, always looking for ways to improve is super valuable.
We've been able to have the chance to run through design thinking with several ministry partners, and that's a big part of this, and the iteration, and not being afraid to fail at something.
Yep.
Like you say in your piece, no plan is perfect. So like being able to say, what did we do well? What did we do wrong? What can we improve on?
Yeah.
And I know that there's certain cultures that we have talked to ministries that's really difficult. Their culture is where you do not fail. And what ends up happening a lot is there's certain cultures that because you do not fail, you don't try.
Right.
And it's like, oh man, if we've got nothing else right, I feel like the American way has been like, just go out there and try, and like fail hard. And that's not always true. But there's been a lot of promotion of that. I think the hustle mentality that's so popular right now, and entrepreneurship.
Sure.
Is that a word?
Sure. Yeah.
It is now.
It is.
Yeah. That like go out and fail 100 times so that you succeed.
Right.
I've heard a lot of guys going for funding or pitching to
venture capital
VC to like get all the no's. Like go get your no's, earn them to where you can get your yeses.
Yeah.
And I think, man, oftentimes because of the current funding situations, working with foundations or donors, I think there's a lot of pressure to not fail.
Sure.
So we just try to really encourage ministries to like take a deep breath and be willing to build risk into the plan.
Yeah.
So that you can iterate, you can improve on it.
Yeah. There's a term in kind of the digital world that's MVP, not most valuable player, but minimal viable product.
Yeah.
And that's one way too for a lot of startup or small organizations that have growth plans, but not the resources to come out of the gate with a perfect product or service. It's really just kind of assessing what's the least we can do to be impactful. Do that, iterate on that, and grow from there and allow it to snowball in a very positive direction versus having to spend tons and tons of time and money kind of creating what is this perfect plan before you ever take it to market and you ever get any feedback. And then you get out there and realize that you were off on one thing and you're
over here where nobody is.
Yeah. And so really kind of defining what your MVP is, your minimal viable product, can be really helpful too. And that's where the polish comes in, right? It's like, let's enter in, let's try to create, an impact and serve the people we're serving. And then let's learn and let's come back and do it a second time. And I think with that mindset, there isn't failure, right? There's constant learning and there's constant improving.
Yeah, you've succeeded to learn something to apply and then move forward. That's awesome.
Yep.
Rob, thanks, man.
It's been enjoyable.
Again, all these P's are at
robbettis.com.
robbettis.com.
Yep.
So check it out.
Yep.
They're there. And if you want to talk to Rob, there's ways to reach out to him there. So make sure to check him out. We'll link it with the video. But I hope this was helpful. And I hope that you can take these P's and you can lay them on top of what you're doing now to try to just kind of see where you are with your people, with your process, your position. I need to memorize these, but just lay them down as a kind of a template on what you're already doing. So again, we'll see you next time on Echo Conversations. If you found this video helpful, share it with a friend and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Make sure you hit that bell so you're notified for all of our future releases. Also find and like us on Facebook. And we have a bunch of free resources for you at echoglobal.org/resources.